The paradigm of Western relationships could be summed up as find the person you are most attracted to and who is also attracted to you, court each other, spend time, if the attraction continues, get married, have children, and live, if not happily ever after, then in endless suffering and misery until you can't put up with one another or die. This could also be called the problem with attraction. So the problem with attraction is woven into the equation of what we're attracted to. So the first thing to be aware of that governs attraction is that the masculine, usually represented by the father, but sometimes in a very masculine woman, the father figure, the masculine figure in the parental system, in the governmental system, and in your childhood influence, is internalized in its relationship with the feminine, which is also internalized. So before we have language, we have a deep imprint of what is masculine and what is feminine and how they relate to one another. This, in order to relate to our outer environment, in order to integrate with the family system, is internalized, pre-verbally and then subsequently verbally. We have now inherited and unconsciously brought in a pattern of relating between masculinity and femininity. And sometimes the woman is in the masculine role, sometimes the male is in the masculine role. We may also internalize that. If we are male and the male is more feminine, we may seek a masculine force, be it in a homosexual male or in a dominant female, that relates to us. And this is not a terribly conscious dynamic. So when we look at what we are attracted to, the first thing to understand is that what attracts us is what we relate to. What we relate to is what we have strong feelings about. Now, this is important to understand about sex because the most potent, intense, meaningful, powerful, however you want to describe it, satisfying sexual experience is a psychological, physical dance, and a tremendous amount of it is psychological. Meaning, sex is mental, emotional, and physical. The brain, synergizing the feelings and the thoughts, is the biggest sex organ. The body is secondary. It's very difficult to have a peak sexual experience without deep overtones of psychology, of thought and feeling. Now, if we have casual thoughts and casual feelings, meaningless thoughts and meaningless feelings, it's a relatively meaningless experience. We call it casual sex, meaningless sex. It meant nothing. Now, what that means is it's not the most satisfying sex of your life. So what is the most satisfying sex of your life? The sex that you had the strongest and most intense feelings about, that meant something. In other words, that integrated with your thought-feeling map at an intense level. Well, what kind of situation brings that about? The one that is most familiar. Meaning, if you've grown up around a particular city, eating a particular food, in a particular smell, listening to particular noises, and you have profound formative experiences in that city, there will always be a magnetism, a dynamism to those smells, those sounds, those pictures, and those tastes. Now, the food could be objectively terrible, meaning, the best chefs that ever existed could sample all the food that has ever been cooked. And your food, the food cooked in your city, could be relatively mundane, relatively low quality ingredients. It doesn't matter. It's meaningful because it associates and brings back memories to you. Eating that food will be a more potent, savory experience, culinary experience, than eating the best food from some other culture, from some other city. Why? Because it's familiar, because it correlates to those formative experiences. So if the best, most intense food is that childhood food, when I was 7, 8 years old, the most amazing treat possible was called a plum candy. And I remember that taste. I would suck on that. It was so intense. Now, I doubt there's anything objectively significant about plum candies. But there was something about it, the context, the familiarity, that if I could have any candy, I'd pick one of those plum candies. I don't even know where to find them. But it would bring back memories. It would have significance. Not because the taste was that exceptional objectively. You might taste it and prefer Mars bar or a scoop of ice cream, but because it doesn't have that meaning. Now, if noisy sounds of a fish, a boat with a fisher's boat, or a certain car alarm sound or something, if a certain type of smell mixed with mild bits of urine in the local factory, that's the air that you grew up with. If that does it for you, if that greasy sausage, whatever, that was it, then the most intense experience in a certain way is going home, is going back to what is familiar. Now, eating greasy, not particularly healthy food because it was familiar, smelling air that isn't particularly clean, but it's your smell. Listening to those sounds that aren't particularly attractive. They're not Beethoven or the sound of birds. They're particular types of sounds produced in a certain kind of industrial city. If that feels like home, I can fall asleep to that. I feel a sense of familiarity. The smell of my father's cigar, that was it. I like that smell. I want to live with a man who smells like that, who smokes the same cigar as my father. That feels comforting. So, when the most profound experiences are often familiar experiences, and many of the familiar experiences are high on the toxicity continuum, cigar smoke versus non-cigar smoke, car alarms, factory sounds versus bird song, chemicals of a certain factory in the air, smell of gas as the cars go by on a busy street, the dirt on the sidewalk. And I want to live there. That is what feels alive. I want to be in that environment. And what I don't want to be in is a tropical paradise with quiet and bird song. It's like, I don't like this. This is unfamiliar. This is strange. How does this tie into sex and relationship? Dad was always physically violent, throwing things, shouting, cursing. Mom was frightened and let herself be raped. And all your strong feelings are associated with those pictures. That's what was internalized as the masculine-feminine balance, as the masculine-feminine dynamic. And so you meet someone and they're happy and they're confident and they're alive and they would never let themselves be raped. You don't really feel anything. It's just some weird person. I don't really understand them. Meet another person who's sensitive and alive and likes themselves and very inward and reflective, and it's like, I don't know how to relate to you. There's no message with the internalized parent, with the internalized culture. But then I see a woman with some characteristics of my mother or my father who's cowering, who's frightened. Immediately I feel alive. I know you. You're familiar. I know what my role is with you. I know how to connect with you. In fact, I feel very alive. I feel like I'm at home, like we're one. Because we are. You found me the same way. You feel at home, that there's something menacing about me, that you know how to cower around. It's like, we're one. And we are. You've got that inner dialogue of your internalized parents. I've got my inner dialogue of my internalized parents. And now we come together and we finally found a counterpart that I can play this role and you play that role, and we're one. You're playing my script, I'm playing your script. It's the same script. And the outer world that became the inner world now becomes the outer world again, and there's symmetry. There's a full circle dynamic. It's amazing. Feels like coming home. It's a mystical experience, and it's intense. And the sex is intense. It has meaning, has feeling. It's dynamic. It's off the charts. Because it relates to what I know. It relates to deep neuronal pathways that have been laid in there, trying with mirror neurons to understand and internalize and relate to mom and dad, to exist in their world so that I would have meaning. You see, a child adapts and internalizes mom and dad, not because they're weird or it's a mistake, but because mom and dad will care for an infant that attunes to their reality more. You know, if mom and dad believe in tragedy and that that life's a bitch and and the child has a happy, magical life, the parents are going to say, where did you come from? And it's a good question. Where did you come from? You didn't come from us. We believe life's a bitch. What are you happily enjoying your life for? You're no son of ours. You know, get out of here. You don't fit our picture. So we can't love something we don't understand. We can't understand something that's different from us. How can we empathize with something we don't know? Why would we adapt our world to protect something that has nothing to do with us? In fact, it's the opposite of us. And a child needs protection to survive, to feel secure in that survival, to experience a sense of love and belonging. And psychologically illiterate people will only love, protect, and provide security to replicas of themselves. There will be no analysis to say, is this child better, more developed than us or less developed, more evolved or less evolved, more intelligent or less? It's just, is it ours? Well, how do we know? Look at him bossing his little sister around. That's just like me bossing you around. That's my son. So the child attunes to the parent. So the parent will protect its own and know its own because it's a copy. It's a replica. The child gets to feel its existence as it internalizes the pattern. So you could say that in a default level, the person you're going to be most attracted to is going to be like one of your parents. Because A, that parental figure is associated with many of your deepest feelings, and the best sex is connected with our deepest feelings. And B, because they are conducive to playing out the dad-mom dynamic with, as an internalized unconscious pattern. So if you're a boy, you could say that the best sex is going to be with your mother, meaning that if you just follow your dick around, your dick will alert you that you're fucking a woman who's very like your mother as an energetic, mental, emotional, physical template. And this will feel good if you've identified with the father. And it'll feel good because there's flow. The best sex has flow. And flow is multidimensional. Meaning, if in your family system, when dad has a tantrum, mom tries to please him, and then dad cools down and does this, and mom successfully pleases dad, and then dad is nice for a while and does this and this. You know that map, it's laid out. It's how the system is supposed to work. Now, if you get angry like dad, and the woman says, "Go fuck yourself, I'm out of here," the system breaks down. It's like, I don't have a move for that. So I guess that was a mistake. So we have to find the woman who's going to please me when I do that. Yeah, you're the one. You're the one. You know the moves. Great. So carry on pleasing me, and I'll do my job of I'll be nice for a while, and then you can do this, and then this, and we all play our roles, and it works. It worked when I was a child, it worked for my parents, it works for me. And it'll work for you too. Shut up, little kid. If you want to be part of this family, do this and do this and this. This system works. It's proven. Worked for my mom and dad, works for me. If it doesn't work for you, go fuck yourself. So, in most cases, our parents were disasters in terms of role models for healthy, sustainable, loving, mature relationships. They were disasters, but their disaster is what we've internalized, which means that the best sex on a stimulation level alone that elicits the most thought, feeling, sensation, that feels like home, is going to be a replay of that with some iteration. Different hair color, 5 years younger, 5 years older, that doesn't matter. The essential moves are the same. Now, that's going to be the case whether your parents were the most amazing married couple you've ever known, or if they're the most horrendous married couple you've ever known. Meaning finding someone to play that unconscious dynamic out with will feel the most intense, the most satisfying, the most like home, the most right. So why is that terrifying? Well, statistically speaking, very few of us can look at our parents and say, you know what, if I could just be like them, if only I can learn to treat my spouse the way my mother or father treated their spouse, I'd have it made. See, most of us, 90% of us, say the last thing we want for a growing, healthy, loving adult relationship is to copy our parents. And yet, if we follow our genitals and say, what's the most satisfying sex, and just shut our eyes and don't pay any attention, it's going to be partnering up with mom and dad and playing the opposing role that we've already internalized with lines and parts we already know. Because the neuronal pathways are there that make it intense. It's like nerve endings. If in a certain part of your body you have 3 times the number of nerve endings, then to be highly stimulated into ecstatic bliss, you want to focus on those patterns of nerve endings. The best sex is where you have the most intense concentrations of feelings and sensations and memories, because the best sex is deeply engaged sex. And the most engaged sex is the area where most of your thoughts and feelings are clustered. And the area that most of your thoughts and feelings are clustered relate to your family history, for good or for ill. It's just that in a psychologically illiterate culture, in a relationally illiterate culture, statistically speaking, it is far more likely that your parents, that our parents, are models of dysfunction rather than healthy, balanced, open, loving, creative, playful relationships. Which means that if we want to have an open, playful, magical, healthy, loving relationship, we're going to go into the unknown. which in a traumatized culture is a terrifying thing. So if you want to know what is the healthiest partner to create a new paradigm of relating with, it may be someone you feel no sexual attraction to at all, because they're not like mom and dad. There's nothing built up, resonant. There's no feeling of home. It's uncomfortable. You make me uncomfortable. In fact, one of the healthiest relationships of my and this woman's adult life began when the woman came up to me. I had just given a small presentation. And she said, "You make me terrified. I'm very, very uncomfortable around you. And I'd like to grow. And so I wonder if you would have dinner with me so that I can learn to be with my discomfort." I said, "That sounds intelligent. Sure, we'll have dinner." That evolved into one of the healthier relationships of both of our lives. I'd never met anyone just like her. She'd never met anyone just like me. In a predominantly dysfunctional relational culture, that's a good sign. Particularly when all of the discomfort is instinctual and mentally it seems intelligent. Meaning, I wasn't attracted to this woman in the slightest. She was not attracted to me. We both agreed that that was a sensible approach. And the relationship that grew out of this was very, very different. In many ways, it was a healing antithesis of the parental relationship. Now, similarly, my wife had little or no sexual attraction to me when we met. I had so little attraction to her, I didn't even want to meet her. I wasn't attracted enough to meet her. I thought, well, maybe I can be useful, offer some support in some way. So I connected as kind of an act of service. And that was kind of our first meeting. What's going on in your life? How can I be useful? Okay, let's be useful. No attraction. I don't even think we hugged, which is very unusual for me. Now, the most sexually satisfying partners of my entire life, one was cheating on her boyfriend, I later learned. Another woman desperately wanted me to be more normal. I was constantly kind of tugging on that. The other woman turned out to be a somewhat traumatized prostitute who was looking for money. And, you know, I have never experienced sex sensations like, oh my goodness, so much pleasure, so much desire. I want more. It's like, oh my goodness, maybe these dysfunctions are worth putting up with just to have some of this profound, it's like just harmonics of sensation. Oh my goodness. Two highly healthy people in my life, half the time I don't feel in the slightest sexual with. It's like, yeah, I'd rather have a fantasy of raping someone and masturbate, or it's like, I just don't connect all of this dynamic charge with you. You're very healthy and all of that. I just don't know really how to relate to that. So the first problem with Western relationships and following attraction is they lead directly to deep copy templates of the masculine-feminine dynamic in the parent, which statistically is highly unhealthy in a chauvinistic, psychologically illiterate culture. So, in other words, if you're highly sexually attracted to someone, statistically speaking, they are going to be less healthy for you than someone you feel little or no, or may even be terrified of. So, the Western edict of find someone you're attracted to and put up with their many shortcomings because you're in lust is not a very good template for a healthy, dynamic, new form of evolving, mature, healthy relationship. So, two very big problems there. Your culture is setting you up to follow attraction, and attraction is setting you up to follow a copy template of your parents, and your parents have a very high statistical odds of having high levels of dysfunction and chauvinism and abuse. So, not a very good recipe. Now, the other aspect of sexuality is addiction. What is new and different because of hedonic adaptation, what is new and different will elicit higher sexual feeling than something that is familiar. Now, what I mean by that is you pick your partner, hopefully with some degree of intelligence, because they're the best you can find. Now, after spending a year, 2 years, whatever, being lovers with your partner, your body and your mind starts to be less present for that experience because it's familiar, because there's no adrenaline around it, because nothing's really gone wrong in all that time, so it's unlikely to go wrong this time. So the level of arousal goes down, the level of presence goes down, so the level of sexual satisfaction goes down. Meanwhile, you see some new potential partner, and you've got higher adrenaline. Maybe it'll go right, maybe it'll go bad. Now there's a risk factor. You're risking your marriage, your faithfulness, so you've got all these, so there's all this heightened chemical dynamic, which means that that sexual experience is going to be more intense. The same is true with pornography. If you look at a new pornography video, you don't know quite what's going to happen next. And so there's going to be more intensity. By contrast, your monogamous or prior monogamous relationship will be less intense because it's familiar, so hedonic adaptation has kicked in. It's the reason you have to take more and more cocaine. Take a little bit of cocaine, tiny little bit, whoa, you never felt so great. Then it's gone. Okay, let's take a little bit of cocaine again. It's nice, but it's not like that. We have to double the cocaine. Whoa, there it is. And double it. And double it. It's just when you're dealing with pain management, and this is a really big issue in a traumatic culture, most people are medicating pain with busyness, with compulsiveness, with food, with media, with dopamine phone clicks, with gambling, with shopping, with house cleaning, are compulsively doing something to manage the anxiety that they will be brought face to face with a traumatic event and feeling that they do not know how to respond to in a traumatically illiterate cult. As a result, they are doing the addictive behavior in fear, hoping that it is busy and frenetic enough to help them avoid whatever it is they don't know or feel prepared to deal with. And this often happens when you're traumatized as a child and then left in a traumatized state because you don't have a single adult around you. You have grown-ups who don't know what they're doing, but you don't have an adult, someone capable of loving and protecting a child. They're just left there. The child is in absolute terror, absolute shame and horror. And they can't get out. And no one shows up. And if they try and talk to it, they get hit, they get humiliated. So they stay stuck there. The only thing they know is, I got to frantically avoid this feeling because I don't know how to heal it. I don't know how to get out of it. So for the rest of their life, they're busily trying to do something. I just hope if I work hard enough, put in enough hours, run fast enough, clean fast enough, that horrible dread will not show up. Well, whatever your drug is, pornography, coffee, sugar, food, it gets familiar. And if sex is your drug and your partner initially provided some safety, you wouldn't think that horrible thought when you're having sex with them for the first time, the second time, the 10th time. But now after the 100th time, they're not protecting you. You're not really present. But you still need your addiction. You still need something new and distracting to avoid that feeling. Your partner is no longer useful for managing pain. They're no longer providing the projected hope of salvation. And they're too familiar. So now you need to manage pain out there. Now you need to go out there to the dating website, to the porn site, to something taboo, something you've never done before. Maybe I could have sex with children, or have a threesome with high school kids, or do this. It's like, I'm sure I wouldn't be thinking about that thought, that line of thought, if I was doing something wholly new, something risky, something this. What if we gambled this? What if we went up and did this? You don't understand. We're only together because at one point you helped me compulsively manage my pain. But if you switch from being an asset to a liability in that equation, I'm going to have to leave you. So as long as you'll up the ante, try drugs and sex, try anal, bring your best friend in and have, as long as you'll keep my stimulation at a certain level, that it's useful for pain management, then I can be nice to you. Give you money, do this, whatever. I can do this for you. But I'm not really doing this for you. I'm doing it for pain management. I'm rewarding you. I'm paying highly for you because you're my drug for now. Which, I guess, is another reason to be alarmed by pursuing chemistry, by pursuing sexual intensity. because at a very deep level, sex is one of the most powerful drugs available. It can ground, it can stabilize, it can balance the mind, it can produce in feelings of falling in love painkillers that are 400 times more potent at killing pain than morphine. Feelings of falling in love can medicate tremendous anxiety, shame, pain. And if they simultaneously bring a feeling of belonging at home because you're copying the family template, you've never felt so good in years. But then you start to see the same dynamics. You start to see, I'm behaving like my father. I'm behaving like my mother. You start to see, I said I never would be that, but I'm doing that same thing. I'm feeling that same way. That's how I sound. And your partner's reinforcing that role because the reason you felt like the one was because you are the counterpoint to her internalized family system. You are the one that most resembles her abusive father, her drunken uncle, her whatever. You are the one out of her entire world that is the replica of her nightmare. But in that replication of her worst feelings and her best feelings and her most familiar feelings, you will provide the most satisfying and familiar sex that she can have in her current neuronal pattern. The deepest groove has already been worn there by the parents. The new groove has not been worn. In other words, you might have to have sex with someone that makes you tremendously uncomfortable, that scares the shit out of you. But you look at them mentally, you say, higher levels of honesty than dad, higher levels of communication than dad, more transparency than dad, more empathy than dad, more intensity of healthy feelings. So the reason I'm scared shitless is I know nothing about all this health. I'm going to have a lot of intense experiences with someone this healthy that I've never seen anything like before I can start to have the intensity and the familiarity with something healthy that I currently have with something unhealthy. So, one of the dynamics of the addict and the pleaser is the addict uses the pleaser for pleasure and distraction, and the pleaser makes themselves indispensable by becoming the drug of the addict. And so you have a codependent relationship. I need something you have, addict. Survival, security, love and belonging, status, something, power. I need something you have, addict. And the addict needs the drug. I will become your best drug. And you will never experience sex like this. I will whimper so that you can feel completely powerful. I will let you do anything you want with my body so that you feel freedom like you've never felt before to offset your helplessness. But you're not going to be able to get rid of me. You're going to need me. And I will leverage that to do what I need. And so the best sex of my life as a drug. You want to take heroin for the first time? It'll be the best thing in your life as well. It doesn't mean it's heading somewhere good, sustainable, beautiful, healthy, loving, mature. So, if you're an addict, the best sex is a drug. If you feel uneasy and uncomfortable and you don't want to, the best sex is mom and dad. Your body's already predisposed to internalize the family system. So all you have to do is find the best sex you can possibly have and marry that person. And you're in an unconscious replicating pattern, which means that the best and the worst of your family system will play out. And since this is statistically dysfunctional, it is a rotten map. Now, what's a counterpoint to this? Because this would lead naturally to an analysis, an understanding, maybe a study of psychology, or looking at certain traits and saying, I want someone who's kind and present. I find you disgusting sexually because you're kind and present. Okay. I've internalized that as well, the contempt for kindness or empathy or the feminine in general. Who had that? Was that Uncle Harry? Was that Dad? So I've internalized my contempt for what would nourish me. So the best way to find a good partner is find who I feel contempt and disgust towards. Good to know. And the best way to find someone highly abusive and toxic is a person I just can't wait to get my pants off and fuck them immediately. I really want to fuck you. It's good to know. You're abusive like this, and this. And I know how to be abused, and you know how to abuse, and okay. You're an addict, I'm an addict. We know how to be an addict together. I know how to do it. I can please you like no one else. Good. Because I know how to use someone like you've never been used. And it'll be so familiar. Familiar. Family. It will be so much like home. And we can destroy each other's lives together, like mom and dad, like the cult role models. Now, a counterpoint to this is the idea that we're part of a family system, perhaps even in some spiritual beliefs have chosen to be part of this spiritual system, to inherit the code of the dysfunctional family. Now, it's important to know that every cult, every culture, and every family is on a continuum of intelligence that is infinite. The highest form of intelligence takes the least amount of energy to create the most amount of sustainable well-being. The lowest form of intelligence takes vast sums of energy to make things worse, and then consumes even more energy to make things even worse. It's stupidity, and it's all around us. So everyone is on a continuum. There's things that are much more stupid than we are, and there's things that are much more intelligent than we are. And we are much more smart and intelligent than these other things here, and we're much dumber than these things here. Now, everything is on an evolutionary path, and nature's been going at this for billions of years and generally seems to know what she's doing. She managed to create the whole multiverse out of nothing. Not a bad feat if you're nature. Take a potent amount of energy, less than the size of the pea, and boom! The universe is created, this, that, and the other, and 20 billion years later, there are more than a billion planets capable of sustaining life in our universe alone, just from what we've seen in a telescope. And our planet has millions and millions of species that are changing all the time, and our species has had 10,000 cultures, and they're dying off and being created all the time. And we seem to be evolving some things, there's growing this and that, and all these things are happening. Nature seems to know what she's doing. Even if the whole human species is wiped off the face of the earth, in another 10 billion years, nature will have come up with some other new intelligent form of life that maybe doesn't destroy itself, even more advanced. Nature is growing. Whether the human race is on the planet in 150 years or not, nature doesn't stop. We could nuke the entire planet down to plankton. And nature will grow that plankton in another billion years. And there'll be other forms of life. For the next trillion years, nature's got plans and a whole universe to populate and grow life out of and do this and develop this and that and the other. Nature's got backup plans. So, by that thing, we're coming in at an iterative point in nature's development where our family system has evolved to a certain point, when our parents didn't know what the hell they were doing. That's as far as nature's got, living through those parents. Here we come in. We pick a woman, a man, the same type of energy. We replay the whole family cycle, and we get to the point where mom and dad didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And then we figure it out. We make some changes. We relive the family dynamic up to the present moment. We do it rather rapidly. Maybe in the first 3 years, we live out the whole marriage of our family, from dysfunctional addiction here to this, to this, to this, to this. And then we come to the point where they didn't know what to do, and one of them shot each other, or one of them died, or one of them left, and we didn't know what to do. And it's like, that's the end of the map. And that's where we come in and evolve the system. So my dad just gave up here. What could nature have done? What could nature do through me that would iterate this in the direction of intelligence? And so in that sense, you could say that the family system, as dysfunctional as it is less dysfunctional than the system 500 years earlier, or could have been. And in 500 years, it'll be more intelligent, because people like us will go through the family system unconsciously, and then they'll get to a dead end, and they'll make a few adaptations to and it'll be like a brush-whacked path. Where the more people that go through the path, the clearer, the bigger the path will, the more someone will put down stuff, potholes, and eventually there will be an evolved family system that works. So you could say that nature's got you covered either way. If you just look at iterative dynamics, we're a little less chauvinistic today than we were 100 years ago. 100 years ago, they were having a debate about whether it was a waste of paper for women to vote. And many women thought it was a waste of paper. That was one of the reasons why women should not be given the right to vote, by the way. The argument was very clear and cogent. good women would vote the exact way their husbands voted. That's obvious, right? Because their husbands were more rational and informed and intelligent. That's obvious, right? So good women would vote the same way as their husband. So what was the point of good women voting? It would just double the amount of paper being consumed. But bad women might not vote the way their husband. They might even not be, horror of horror, be married. Oh my goodness. Women not getting married? Oh, well, we couldn't have these women voting. All the good women would vote just with their husband, then these women would do this and that, and they shouldn't be allowed to vote. So for the good women, it would just be a waste of paper, and the other ones, who cared about them? Well, we would never think that. We would just automatically never vote for a female president. That's our form of chauvinism, but of course they can vote for male presidents. So you could say that we're less chauvinistic than we were as a cult 100 years ago. And that 100 years from now, if nature has her way, our grandchildren will be far less chauvinistic than we are. That we will look as, if nature is iterative and successful in the evolutionary path of human culture through us, we will look like outdated morons to our grandchildren. And that'll mean that nature did a lot of iterating between us and our children and our children and our grandchildren. Just like she did looking back on whether women should have the right to vote today. You could say nature has been busy in the last 100 years evolving the human psyche into a more intelligent, balanced ecosystem. And so you could say that unconsciously, we'll copy our parents most of the time. We'll get to the end of their reel of templates, and then we'll do a little bit of intelligent stuff before we die or before we leave the relationship. And then our children will get a little better thing when they copy it. First you find someone to cheat with, then you do this, then you do this. Okay, that finishes mom and dad's marriage. Then you talk about it and have a family meeting and the truth comes out and then the marriage really starts. Okay, so then your children do that unconsciously. You find someone to have an affair with, then you break up their family, then you do this, then you do this, then you come to the end of the road, then you have a conversation with your kids and you do this. And then your child says, well, why don't we just skip all that cheating and stuff and just have the conversation and do this and this, and what about this? And then they do another version. And your version looks outdated. So you could say it's fine as long as you don't die, getting lost in the spiral of repeated events, to copy your parents unconsciously, rapidly come to the end of their program and iterate, hopefully in the direction of intelligence. And then your children will do that as well. Or you can consciously intervene and say, you know what? My dad's choice was to date someone who was financially and psychologically terrified, in a very dependent state, and then cling to him and lie to him so that he wouldn't leave her. So I'm going to date someone who is unusually confident, has their own resources, is independent, who will tell me when I'm full of shit. I won't feel attracted to them because they're not like mom. But they will be a healthy iteration. And maybe after I develop deep feelings based on higher levels of truth and candor, maybe I suddenly discover that I'm now attracted. And because Mom always lied to soothe Dad's ego, I'm going to find someone who says controversial things that I'm scared of what they'll say next. I won't feel the slightest bit sexual towards them. I'm terrified of them. But I may grow up and become a healthy human being. And maybe if I have sex while I'm terrified of the truth, I'll become more comfortable with the truth, and my body will learn that I don't die when someone tells me the truth. And in 5 years, with concerted discipline, I will feel passionately sexual towards someone I currently feel anxiety around. And having found a new center, a new neuronal pathway, a new groove that I've worn in, I'm now somewhat bored with what used to be so exciting. The helpless woman who invites me to rape her, the heroic thing that just feels so comfortable. In conclusion, nature will evolve in one of two ways. You'll either copy all the dysfunctions of your parents without having to think at all, have high levels of sexual satisfaction for at least part of the way, unless your parents had to hate each other sexually. Then you may iterate the family program consciously or unconsciously and pass it on a little bit more refined to your children, who will keep doing it unconsciously and picking someone as dysfunctional as you were when they marry someone. Or you can intervene and take a shortcut, skip many of the comfortable, familiar, highly erotic, dysfunctional patterns of your family. Spend time with highly unfamiliar, very healthy and uncomfortable human beings. And choose to have sex so that over time you will want to have sex with healthy people that embody people that don't play your pattern and break them, so that you can create the neuronal template so that next time you meet a really healthy person, they will feel familiar, like your first healthy partner.